So technically, the recording has started, but we haven't. I still got to trim the edges. But we can talk about things like gossip, and I don't want to talk about anecdotal stories, but
All right, I'll keep you off those.
I mean, no, like, I don't want this to be me going, oh, we shouldn't talk about gossip. By the way, there was this one time, this one guy. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Shit. Anything else, though, that's... Because, I mean, I wouldn't mind jumping a little bit into the new atheist movement, but we don't have to.
Oh, I would laugh at that.
Okay.
I mean, I can talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if I really have talked about it, but like in the Marine Corps, I was like completely just kind of like, I probably will have been more on their side of things before. Like, yeah, what Neil deGrasse's got a point. Why would he let bad stuff happen? Why would he, that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care about talking about it.
All right, cool. That sounds good to me. That'll be like the second part.
Because it is, I mean, it is funny to watch because it is part of the gun scene right now, because more dudes are starting to realize, like, man, I was kind of living empty.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been kind of, I'm starting to see, okay, yeah, this faith thing actually makes a lot more sense now that I've seen the complete opposite side of what the fuck they were telling me that I should care about or that I should worry about.
I'd like to use that as an intro, but I don't know if it's correct.
I'm just an idiot on the microphone with a.
Yeah, well, remember, I don't smoke tobacco because I like the flavor. I smoke tobacco because it makes me look smart.
Likewise.
So we'll use that as the intro because that's probably the best way to jump into this episode. We'll count that as the beginning, though.
Okay.
So, Collin, welcome back to the Redacted Culture Cast. Now that I feel like I'm not as cool as, like, Tucker Carlson, but I'm trying to do my little thing from here in the woods. I'm back up. I'm still up in kind of my own home turf when I was younger, back up in Minnesota, and we've had a chance to have a number of good conversations, especially over the past, but I wanted to dig into one more with you while we're here. So would you introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, I am Collin Underdahl. I am also a Minnesotan, even though neither of us will have an accent, unless maybe. But yeah, probably have heard me before if you listen to the show or others like it. I'm just an idiot who gets invited onto these.
Well, if you're an idiot who gets to get invited onto them, what does that make me? Because if you argue with a fool, you make yourself a fool.
Remember the pipes.
Oh, yeah. It's just, like, what's the old adage? It's like, oh, it's plus 10 to intelligence. Yeah, whatever. So maybe it's charisma at this point in time. But so let's just kind of jump back to the parts. Thanks for listening. We're getting into we're going to have a two-phase conversation here with Collin. One of them that I've been looking to have for a while, and if you are watching on YouTube, you'll see that I'm a little scraped up. I wish I could say it was my first time, but it wasn't necessarily a near-death experience, but it could have been one. And some of these things have a way of shaking you up, but I think both of us come from a military background, and there's a kind of a consistency within the military, especially in like more of the combat arms side of things, that tends to, let's just say, excuse bad behavior with like the threat of life, right? Like I remember being on a deployment or getting ready for a deployment saying, well, I might as well do things that are wrong. I know that are immoral because I'm going to go overseas and I might actually get hurt, and I might as well get them done. I don't want to die this way or something like that. And it's not exactly a lighthearted way to jump into the conversation, but
yeah, but I think I get what you're saying, because, I have the possibility of dying, so I may as well live. And then you're like, realize later, you're like, that wasn't actually living either, so, yeah.
Making excuses for bad behavior, using danger and stuff. But let's start with the first topic today. And that was it's cued from something that you said. I've heard you say it in, like, we've had a conversation about it kind of privately a couple weeks ago. I heard you say it. I think it might have gotten brought up a little bit in your appearance on Dirty Civilians show, and you said it in a way that I kind of find it intriguing. I quite seriously find it intriguing, especially in the context of not only gun culture but Americana as a whole. And that went something like, the culture is not entitled to my opinions. Could you? I know I'm paraphrasing it poorly. Could you kind of expand on that idea real quick?
Yeah, we were talking about just stuff in general. Couple incidences that we've both experienced where someone feels the need that they're privy to information that doesn't necessarily even affect them, nor does it really pertain to anything of value to them, but they're prying anyways. And I think what I said on Dirty Civilian was to Drew and Josh. I said that them starting that up, like, me and Drew, are pretty close. We game a lot together. I've had the, pleasure of going to airsoft events and stuff like that, and hopefully we'll do more stuff with them in the future. But, like, so we'll tell each other things, right, as friends do, and conversations happen and stuff like that. And I knew what he was looking at doing before it even started, right? But, like, I'm not going to tell anyone about it, and I wasn't obligated to know that. He told me in confidence, right? Mm-hmm. And you have people who think because there's a quote-unquote gun culture that that the only way the gun culture can get closer is if we all are in each other's business. And it's like, yes and no. Like, you've said plenty of times on the show, like, there should be expectations of entry, or you've talked about gatekeeping, and how gatekeeping necessarily in itself isn't bad if it's done for the right reasons. Because if anyone got to walk in today and just become a Marine or become a Ranger, right, because they wanted to, it would take away all of the value of those titles. Mm-hmm. So they're gatekeeping the title to make sure you rate the title, mm-hmm. right? So just not everyone being entitled to your opinion on every single matter, or being entitled to information that you may know due to your place of work or who you're friends with or anything like that. Like, the prime example I talked about when we were talking to set this up was, like, you're going to tell your wife stuff that you're not going to tell me. I'm going to tell my girlfriend stuff that I'm not going to tell you, right? Are you entitled to that opinion? And if you upscale that, like we did in the conversation before, what point there is there privacy at that point? Mm-hmm. Like, where does privacy actually start? Because if everyone feels like they're entitled to, because you're part of whatever, insert anything. Mm-hmm. I don't like doing it in a vacuum so much, because insert it in just your day-to-day relationships. There's people that you trust more with certain information that you would gatekeep, or like not hide, but you would essentially gatekeep that information from that person, because they are not entitled to that opinion or that knowledge or that thought that you have if you don't want them to. And I think it's weird. I think it's the biggest thing that I've realized that I've reoccurringly said on most of these shows is I just get tired of this demand. I get tired of the demanding mob. And it's not just gun culture. We see it in every single facet of life right now, where people will want an answer, and instead of going about ways to actually get the answer, they form a mob. They do mob type actions of threats of violence, or trying to, like, the other ones are like, for this, like, oh, someone from this company said something stupid, let's get him fired. It's like, it's just, it's mind-boggling to me, because it's like, if you're trying to say that you're not if you're trying to say that you're the opposite and you're not wanting to be like that, and you're trying to live morally, and that gun culture as a whole generally gravitates towards morality, if you can blow that off when it's convenient, then you're no moral than the people you say you despise.
Yeah, like I think we need to add a little bit of context too, and that can easily be a distraction, but we're talking about not necessarily an ambiguous topic, but it's something that stretches across our culture in different ways. But one of them would be, let's help refine it a little bit, because the backside of it I see that's going on is that the last 2 years, maybe the last year, maybe the last 3 years of whatever we're calling gun culture has been very focused on community in a very good way. And I think a lot of America is turning that way as well too, at least the West, where we're sort of receding from this universalist approach where we're all like, we all see eye to eye, we're all the same kind of mentality.
Here's an example. Mm-hmm. Is your life in there? Well, can I say that? Where you're at now?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I know I'm in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember.
That's all right.
Is your life in Arizona different than your life in Minnesota?
A bit, but not entirely.
Not entirely, but it's still a different lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's still different people down there.
Yep.
You were telling a story before that, they still handle things a certain way down there versus other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the United States is states, and the states are representing the people of the states, and not every single state is going to be the same, but the whole goal of the overall United States is supposed to be states that are united in the big picture.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where I think we fail at. It's not lockstep opinion of everyone thinking the same. The overall picture is where we should focus. The overall goal of it should be obviously similar, the same. There may be disagreements, but generally, like gun culture stuff, it's like you have the right to own guns. That's obvious, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I believe that having arms is obviously the only preventative measure you really have against, someone else forcing their will on you. So whether that's privately in your home, in a home invasion or whatever, or whether that's civilly through a forceful government trying to force you to do stuff or bar you from stuff that you would otherwise fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people look under a microscope sometimes to try and they try and microscope things a lot and try and pinpoint very specific things about whatever, insert this, and then they feel entitled, since they're looking at it, that they're supposed to be able to just expect you to have an answer of some sort that you're like. Because let's be real, people take screenshots of private conversations
mm-hmm.
that were had in confidence, or an illusion of confidence at that point, that now they go off and run with it. And the problem is has there been places where that type of tactic shows the truth? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe does that. Right? And yes, he is going into the trenches and expunging some of the grotesque shit in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a hard time watching people being like, where's the community? What's happening to the community? Well, they're also some of the same people who are ready to join the mob. Or drag through the coals, or it's. And this could itself sound like gossip, but it's just more of a thought to me. It's like man, I don't. At a certain point, it's like, where's the checkout? Where do you start to realize? Because a lot of this, let's be real, happens on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever seen it, or had to deal with it yourself, or been involved in any of it, or had ties to it, like we're not going to get into specifics, I know, but like you said beforehand, you knew some people who had something going on, and someone asked you, hey, what's going on with this? And it's like, you're outside of that group of people that I would talk to about it. So are they entitled to that what you know? Are they entitled to what your opinion is on it? Personally, I don't think so. Because at a certain point, if you're a private person, you get the luxury of keeping private secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not even secrets, but they're private things to you.
Privacy is a tricky subject. I think we see it we see it a little bit more easily when we're looking like at the big picture scale, especially on the political government scale, right? So like an individual, you and I have rights to privacy, and the core, like the more the base level of privacy, the most foundational level of privacy is belief, which incorporates thought.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you have a right to. I think it's even more deeper than a freedom of speech. And you see this in like the dystopian novels and how it's displaced or it's inverted, where the cameras in the home are recording your actions and you have to affirm the thing, or in like the communist environment where like you have to lie because where was I hearing it talked about either and maybe it was recently, but it was like when governments were starting to install listening devices in people's homes everywhere, you would hear recordings of people coming home and talking about stuff. And they would be saying things that you wouldn't have a conversation in your normal house, right? You wouldn't go home to your family. You wouldn't go visit your parents and be like, glory to the emperor, he's such a great man. Don't you love the emperor? He's such a great person. They would say things because they had to say the current thing,
yep.
Right? Which raises a certain level of concern in that we as citizens are participating in our government inherently because we exist in this country. Like, you don't get to not participate in the country that you're a citizen of. To some extent, there's maybe a vague line there, but when the government has secrecy but you don't have privacy,
yep, that
becomes an imbalance.
Yeah. And okay, so think about this. Yeah, from the opposite spectrum of government held secrets versus public information. Mm-hmm. Like, you can obviously there's still the Freedom of Information Act that, you can start being like, is that really supposed to be a secret, or are you doing some shady shit, right? And that's how shady shit's been uncovered before. It's like, it's a line, right? Like, mm-hmm. there's a line to teeter there. Mm-hmm. Because secrecy itself is not bad, but it's the intention of the secrecy that is where we should be concerned.
Yeah, like an anecdotal event was, I was talking to a guy a long time ago who was part of the Marines and Rangers have funny relationships. Mm-hmm. But he was part of the Marine. I don't know. I don't even know what I would call it. But they were the Marines who landed on the beach in Somalia before even the events of like Mogadishu, mm-hmm. and Black Hawk Down and where like my heritage comes from. And one of the things that they encountered as the boats were approaching the shoreline was they got hit by like searchlights, super bright lights. And they were concerned that they were compromised, and they were getting ready to open fire until they discovered that who was there was a news crew from like a big name 3-letter news organization, right? I don't remember whether it was CNN, or MSNBC, Fox News. Maybe all of them, maybe none of them. It doesn't matter to me, right? But like what ended up happening was you're going on a military operation that is a risky endeavor inherently. And whether or not the actions are justified is a different conversation. But even within this context, these people are going into a different country in a sort of military style. Well, they're doing a military, event, and they're compromised by American news platforms, which could have caused great loss of life and compromised the mission. So there should have been some, maybe secrecy is the right word there. That's an example where I think secrecy would make sense. It's like, you know, if you're going to go do, another really good example is the Bin Laden raid, right? Imagine if, you know...
Well, he has the right to knowing. They should drop leaflets, bro.
You know, or like, you know, you think about it too with serious players in the intel and military and operations and secret in the game. Like the serious players are watching your cultural news feeds to see what information that your country's going to give up about your operations. Think about it. Let's make the superimposition of, let's say Russia and America are in conflict. Do you really think that Russian intelligence is not watching American politics to see what is triggering people, and vice versa?
Exactly.
Right? And when you're talking about people who, their job is not like me to be a talking head on the internet. Their job is to plan a military operation that involves who knows what. Insert your day after tomorrow event now. And so there's a certain level of secrecy that needs to happen in that environment. And that is a line that can be balanced, or it needs to be, I would almost say shepherded by wise men, which is where morality comes. You can't just fix it purely with policy. The inverse applies to us. We're citizens of the United States. We have a right to some form of privacy. And when we talk about rights, we're not talking about it in the flippant way that people burn down buildings and complain about rights. We're talking about it in the way of like metaphysical reality or moral imperatives within a government, that when you impede on and you infringe on these rights, the government is delegitimizing itself in a certain way. And it's like, it's where we live. It's the time that we live in. Like, we don't get to choose to go back to a simpler time as much as we'd love to.
I don't think, we literally can't, because we're simple. The funnier thing is the simpler times were harder times, but now the high-tech times are essentially the simpler times, because we're simpler people. Yeah, we have all this understanding of technology, but like, look at the technology. It makes our lives a hell of a lot easier, to the point where, you know, like, we can, like, people have the luxury of working from anywhere these days, right? Your labor now can literally be put into a digital device and generate you income, right? So,
at least in theory.
In theory. Yeah, because the government's going to always outspend you, your dollar, time value of money, inflation. Anyways.
It goes on, yeah.
But
that rabbit hole will never end.
Yeah, especially, yeah. But no, I find it funny because now we're going to the opposite. We're realizing this. Hey, the people before us were a lot harder people. They were a lot more like grounded people. They had a foundation that was unshakable in many facets. And you look at it goes into this topic. You watch this stuff unfold, where the internet and drama and gossip can consume someone's life, and some people are literally making a livelihood on just that, right? Mm-hmm. But then now we're watching people kind of be like, why is it like this? Why do we not have this? And then, you know, you can go watch someone. The cool thing is now the technology that we have is now bringing back the people who never stopped doing what our ancestors did, like homesteading and stuff like that. It's bringing that into a presentable way of like media, right? Because now you can self-produce media, right? You're not reliant on what X company decides to show you or not show you. So now people are going backwards in the sense that they want those challenges. They want the fulfilling life. They want the grounded life, literally and physically, and spiritually. But it's hard for them to let go of some of the ease of the simpler stuff, which is gossip. And I think that, because you had mentioned this, like in almost all ancient texts giving you advice from, like, obviously it's a Christian value not to gossip, but even like if you read Stoic stuff, like they're like, men don't gossip, like true noble men do not gossip.
Yeah.
Right. Because your time on this earth is too limited, too finite, to the point where if that's your whole life, you're going to squander what you could have been, right? And I wish I should do a little bit more research on it. I wish I would have a little bit more of the Christian side of that, but I find it funny too. Is like I enjoy thought. I think it's interesting to watch more people dive into them, and I really hope more people do. I like the fact that people are starting to look back at history for themselves rather than the history that we've been taught, because the history that's been glossed over a million times to just get you to fill out the fill in the blank test, like, that's not history. You're not doing anybody a service. You're pretty much getting told, hey, your ancestors were racist, or they were terrible people, or look what, you're German, look what the Germans did. You're Russian, look what the Russians did. Like you're getting shamed all the time in that teaching of history, but they never take into the whole sphere of things. Prejudice existed because there was things to be prejudiced about. Hey, you raped and pillaged my hometown. Like, yeah, we have a fucking problem, bro. You know?
We're just not gonna like sit over this with tea.
Yeah. So I find it funny that we've gotten to the point where gossip is easy. You can be, you can pull out your phone and be hooked into the IV all day.
Yep.
It's interesting because, yeah, you can see some really lunatic statements said on the internet, and hopefully most of the people who are listening to this read a couple of them, shake their head, put their phone down, and go, I can do better than whatever I'm consuming right now, right?
I don't like the fact that since I've launched this company and since Redacted has come about, I am spending so much more time online consuming information that is not pertinent to my life. I don't like it, and I don't like the fact that I have to come to terms with it. I can't just avoid it and negotiate out of it.
I feel that. Yeah, I mean, being in the position that I'm at right now for work, it's the same thing. It's like, it would be a disservice to it would be a disservice to my role in the company to not be at least informed. That's the thing, is I make sure that because it's really easy too. Like it's a dopamine, but it's like an anti-dopamine too. It's like there's probably a word for that, but the dopamine hit that you're getting from it is like actually in a negative inverse effect where you are now hooked onto the thing you are consuming, but it is actually either not necessary. It doesn't always necessarily tear you down directly, but it is tearing down your state of mind to a point where, again, here's a good example. Most of the time in a mob, who is the leader of the mob? It's usually the loudest person. And then everyone else is just kind of turning off. Hey, that guy seems to have something figured out, right? I like to bring up this example because we're both from Minnesota, but like, I love seeing 2 years later people coming forward and be like, yes, I was part of the riots, but I've changed my tune because they burned my house down. Weird,
yeah, like you've drank from the poisoned well.
Yes,
that is a hard place to be.
You want to feel I feel sympathetic for them because that is their abode, and I don't want homeless people either, and I don't want you to. my main point is I wish you would have thought of where these steps you put in place, where this ball was going to roll.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you roll a ball down the hill and you live at the bottom of the hill, you should maybe think about, hey, is that going to hit my house? You know?
Okay, so let's go back to just gossip again, because we're talking about we're talking about this. I think you could almost say that. I don't think it's a stretch anymore. The internet commodified gossip.
Oh yeah,
it commodified it.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yes.
So it turned something that was otherwise. I mean, it turned something that was otherwise. It's been around since the beginning of time. Whether it's, dishonest people with each other or whatever, but it commodified gossip in a way that we've seen before, but not at the same scale. And
it made it lightning fast too.
Made it lightning fast and lightning profitable for some people.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And if we were to take the concept of gossip and reduce it into the community that we're a part of, I think that's something that you have a good avenue to speak into. I think you have a good avenue to speak into, gossip, because you're part of gun culture. You're an industry guy. You work here. You exist here. You've got different credentials from whether it's military experience, but at the same time, we're not living in the area where credentialism is just the best thing to do. Fly keeps attacking my scab. It's annoying. I know it's gonna sound weird on the mic because I'm talking down, but hey, it happens. But so gossip in our culture is interesting because it's shamed in a one way, but it's also commodified. It makes a lot of profit, and we can see gossip really easy, I think, in the news, in the news media kind of sphere, where it's spreading salacious rumors about people that aren't necessarily true but are close enough to true, and you're lying about things, and it gets extremely vague. But let's reduce it into just gossip, sharing private information or talking badly about people behind their back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the easiest way that I've seen this happen in the veteran sphere specifically is that you'll talk to a guy and you'll get to know each other, or you're starting to get to know each other. You meet somebody. And the first thing that we start doing is we start finding who we mutually like and who we mutually hate.
You're building your tribe.
And you're building your... yeah, right? And you're like, oh, did you hear what such and such said? He's such a dumbass. He's such a whatever, right? Or
yep.
Oh, did you see what this guy said? And you see what this guy said, or what happened over here? And it's I think we do need to be careful with... And I'm trying to speak from a position right now where, I recognize that I don't... I recognize that I'm probably really bad at this.
Oh, that's okay. So yeah, let's put a disclaimer out there. This isn't us pedestaling ourselves of free of gossip and never indulging in its poisonous lust. But it's I mean, at a certain point, I think both of us are here and doing stuff like this because you obviously have enough. You have enough thought into this to think, hey, so things that I have in here need to be said for those out there, right? You don't. That's essentially why you started a podcast, and I think that's good because I mean, the people you've had on, there's probably people that agree with everything that one person says and maybe has quarrels with another or maybe despises it. But the funny thing is there's probably some underlying things that they agree on.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too is what may be gossip to one person may be just talking about a situation to another. And that's again, where's the line? Good question.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would break down gossip with more. I think I would break down gossip to have, a statement made with less, if you're filling in gaps or you're just saying a sparking statement to someone and then they follow up with a question, you go, I don't know. And that statement you made could be perceived negatively, or it could be detrimental to someone else or something. That I wish we should have looked up the definition of gossip before this. But I believe that's pretty dang close.
Yeah, so as far when I think of the word gossip, I think about this. I think of gossip as, in a sense, trafficking in information that is not edifying to the person you're talking to, not benefiting them, like not.
Would you say less than full? Because that's how I'm kind of picturing it too. It's like,
I don't necessarily think about it as lying, and it's not like
I don't mean true. Less than full, as in like less than full information. If I saw you take a drink of that right now, and I told someone else over there that you just took a drink of your drink, right? That's not really gossip. That's the full truth. But like, if I said, yeah, he took a drink of that, and I don't know if it was alcohol, but it looked like it, right? Because that's true, but it's also insinuating the malice purpose of, oh, well, why was he, if having, not that this is water, but even if this was full vodka, this was not out of the full, like, inappropriateness of this whole conversation. No. It would just get worse as I, drink more.
Yeah. Well,
but do you get what I mean? Like,
I do, and I think the hard thing with gossip is it really does come down to what you would call an almost like a Christianese, like, easy word phrase. It comes down to a heart issue, and that can be really easy really easy for like even to dismiss for myself. Like, oh well, I'm not doing it out of malice.
I just have a heart issue.
Yeah. I just have a condition. I can't keep.
Sorry, my condition is just I'm an asshole.
What is? It's like the operator male version of like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just a cancer. Oh well, I'm an asparagus. No, I think that has to do with it. But gossip I think gossip is pretty straightforward. It's the sharing of information for the purpose of personal gain that is not edifying to neither the person whose information you're sharing or the person you're speaking to, right? So, and what that would look like in this sense would be, within our industry, things happen. Sometimes it's dramatic. We call it the drama. Within our culture, there are things that go on in the world that, like, we're human beings. We make errors. But if I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to badmouth somebody else who's not there, and I'm doing that for the sake of gaining your favor or camaraderie, that could be considered gossip. I think another example of what gossip.
I think that would be a good example of gossip, because that's generally how it's used.
That's generally how it's used.
And the problem, so I like where you're going with this. The one thing that I think the problem with that is if that is your main bargaining tool to get close to someone else, one, do you want to be close to someone who takes that information as your closeness, like as you're bringing together? And two, if you are taking in people like that into your circle, do you think it's not going to happen to you? It's kind of like the relationship advice of like, you should, like, if someone hasn't heard this, they should right now. If someone cheats on someone to be with another person, and that other person is now with them, right? So the one who the cheater cheated with, do you really, as the person who is in the relationship with the former cheater, still cheater, do you think that's not somehow magically not going to be a possible outcome for your relationship?
Yes.
If it was validated once, where does it stop?
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, there's all these people who are going to jump down my throat saying, oh, well, I have a different story. Sure. I'm not discrediting that there's other factors in those stories, right? But it's just, it's having the forethought of, does this go where I want it to go? Does this build what I want it to build? And if your goal is to have a solidifying relationship in that example, you should be worried.
Yes. I think there are verses in Proverbs that talk to this, like Old Testament, biblical things that are said in this sense, where it's like, I'm not going to try to quote scripture right now because I'm going to not do it correctly.
I hate it because I butcher everything I quote, and it's like I don't want to butcher that.
There is some moral weight to that. So, but it is like, if a person is willing to gossip to you, how can you not expect them to gossip about you?
Exactly.
I once worked a job under a guy who did that. He would come into the office every day. He was a manager, and he would gossip about the other person. And then one day, I came around the corner, and what was he doing? Gossiping about me to him.
Yep.
And needless to say, he was not a highly, obviously I don't have a lot of respect for the guy. I don't have a lot of respect for him, and I don't know him anymore. And it was a very short time in my life. But that is an example of an experiential thing. When we're talking about gossip, we can talk about it from a utilitarian perspective, and that would be, well, if you build a civilization or a population or community on gossip, on lies, you cannot expect it to have a firm foundation. And so, like, if we're willing to gossip with each other, what we're doing is we are undermining the foundation of our community. And that doesn't happen with somebody over there. It happens with you here. It happens with you and me at this table. It happens with us after we shut the podcast down. It happens in all these different categories. But I think there's another argument that can be made towards it having to do with the morality of it. And something more like a moral imperative, in that it doesn't matter what the outcome is, the action is immoral. And I think gossip could fit into that category of, it becomes gossip, it becomes immoral, it is immoral because it's gossip, and gossip is such that it does the certain thing. It is, building, it is the trafficking of information that is, it's the
questionable.
Well, I think it's the traffic of information for the purpose of slander without being directly slanderous. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not
yeah.
If I spread a rumor about you,
because the other thing too is you could gossip and you could essentially do it with no real intention, but just see how it forms the conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, which and then too, it still opens the door. It still opens the door of like, is that what you want? Is that like, is your moral framework so low that you are willing to kind of just throw things into the void and see where they go? That's again, it kind of goes back to the simpler. We're simpler people in many ways. We have simpler things to do, harder tasks, which makes our life easier and simpler. But when you had to do more to get done, so in a way, I honestly, it would be interesting to like pull someone out of the grave and ask them questions about 120 years ago or something like that, when people were still pretty much using tractors. Were probably invented, but were not mainstream. People were probably still pulling their hoe through the dirt with an ox. In a way, you could see how gossip could be beneficial in those situations, because I still think you could, even back then, I still think you could probably monetize gossip, because the interesting thing about it, we have a double-edged sword here. We have the lightning fast ability to spread gossip, but we also have the lightning fast ability to stop it by making statements. And that's where deplatforming is scary, because if someone, like, we've seen this on a nationwide, we've seen this where people go and say so-and-so is, like the Kavanaugh trial is a great example of it. He's a rapist. Okay, when? Like 40 years ago, to be specific. Actually, yeah, 40 years ago on this specific date. Who was there? He was. Who else? Yeah, and so it's like now, and thankfully that one got sorted out. And if it didn't, well, guess what? Like, even if we were wrong in that one, if you believe in a bigger power, well, guess what? He still has to pay for his actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know what?
Yeah,
like,
on a political scale, that makes a lot of sense. It's like you're going to spread rumors about somebody, you're going to accuse somebody of something. I don't know if I'd really categorize that specifically as gossip, although it fits the bill within a contextual frame.
I think there's a scale to it.
Yes,
I think there's a scale, because that would just be malicious slander. And
yeah.
Slander and libel, like that's malicious slander and libel right there. So yeah, but it's interesting too, because like you brought up literacy laws earlier, which makes me kind of think about there was at one point in time there was actually a point in our country where slander and libel laws, they still exist. They're buried deep down in the country's foundation. They still exist in probably the majority of the states. But like, when's the last time that you actually seen? There's a couple big ones, national wide. The smiling guy, that smiling guy with the red hat, the young dude. I don't remember his name.
Oh yeah. The Covington kid.
Yeah, he essentially won a slander libel lawsuit because they wrote and said pieces, kind of making a hit piece of him.
Yep.
So like, the morality was built, like that mindset of morality was built in the framework of law. But it is so pick and choose when we actually use it, and also too, it's almost in many ways, outside of the extremes, it is almost impossible to prove.
I think slander laws are really a double-edged sword and a tool of the rich and famous.
Yeah.
Right now.
It's
It's easy to, if you control a large platform, right? If you are a position of authority and let's just call it power in a large news organization, you can get away with it by slandering somebody who does not have the means to defend themselves in a certain way. Well,
yeah, and you have the backing of the company who's gonna, like, oh well, he gets this millions of views. We'll go to bat for him for $4 million. If this case looks like it's going to exceed $4 million, then we're gonna drop him and fire him and drag him through the mud. But yeah, like you said, it's for the rich and the famous, to the point where the fact that kid won his case is a glimmer of hope, because that means that there's still people out there ready to fight that fight. I would be curious about the lawyer situation and all that stuff, or the legal consulting he had for that, and how it was either paid for or if it was done out of charity. Because I want to say this, because I do know a lawyer who backed me up when I was in a tight spot. He had been coming to my classes that I was doing at the old gun range that I worked at. And when the school tried to essentially get me to sign a form to get me to either wear a mask, or they were confronting me about not wearing a mask. And I was like, I'm not playing this game. Like, this isn't legitimate. I'm not listening to you. You are not a medical officer, blah, blah, blah. So the school made this waiver where, all you got to do is sign this thing and saying that you object, right? Well, like a good business student that I was, I read the thing, right? And what it opened me up to was essentially the school said in the bottom print that yes, this gets me out of wearing said mask, but the school can request other medical documents and actions.
Oh, it was a trap.
And I was like, I know what fucking actions you want me to take. Like, it is very clear there's a push here. Like, no, right? So so how does my lawyer friend go into this? Well, I read that. I was looking for all the avenues that I could to, avoid it. Looking at possibly just dropping out of school. I went to school on the GI Bill, so I was like, hey, I'm more of a perk to them than they are to me. I'm guaranteed paid up front money. Like, they're gonna get it right now when the GI Bill pays out, rather than getting it in lump sums over the time of the loans getting paid out and shit. Right? So there's still people who believe this stuff like that. There's still people willing to fight those fights, which are clearly uphill battles. And I try to remind myself that on occasion, because the black pill is easy to swallow and it goes down so smoothly with honey, because you're like, yes, this justifies every little ounce of dread that I have in my body, and it validates every thought that I have that's the future's grim. But my point being is, there are still people ready to fight that fight. There are still small victories that we see, and essentially what ended up happening for me, I ran into a wall. I was like, all right, he said if I ever have a question, just send him a text. Texted him and said, hey, what do you think about this? I sent him the form, and I was typing a little bit more context. And before I even finished the first sentence, he texts me, fuck no. Right after I get the fuck no, he's my phone's ringing and he's calling me. He's like, don't fucking sign it. We're going to court. And he goes on to say that, oh, hey, there's this thing that lawyers are supposed to do. It's, I wish I could remember what it's called, but it's essentially lawyers are supposed to stay keep their moral compass aligned by taking on cases that they're not going to take money for, right?
Yeah. I know the term. It's escaping my mind.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're doing. It's not charity specifically.
It's not charity, but it's essentially, it's essentially
not
to
per diem. It's something else. I know what you're talking about.
It's to show. It's pretty much to show that you haven't lost.
Pro bono.
Yeah, pro bono is like the free. Yeah, but I'm saying like there's a term in it in the legal sphere that they kind of it's supposed to keep your compass straight.
Yep.
It's supposed to make sure you are not just a lawyer because money. And obviously there needs to be. They do a lot of work, and they do a lot of excruciating work of reading fine prints and finding little key documents, right?
Yep.
So it's not that it's illegitimate. But anyways, we've kind of veered off from gossip a little bit, but it is interesting to think about because we were supposed to be founded on a moral society, but this country was also supposed to be upheld by moral men.
Mm-hmm.
So which way is it? Are we failing because what? I think honestly the hardest truth is we are failing because there are a couple generations who lost the moral path and went for the easy path. Mm-hmm. And I think it's inverse now, where people who have lived on the side of the immoral path but are getting to the point in their life where they're realizing, man, this is soul crushing and empty, that now they're like, holy shit, Christianity makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit. Like, all these things that I did were wrong.
I want to go into that in part 2.
Okay.
I really do.
Yeah.
Because I think we're going to get into that pretty hard, and you got a story that I want to hear. I want to hear it sitting across the table from you, and I want to be able to be a part of that, or just at least listen to it. So I'm going to try to do that. Let's just close off the topic of gossip real quick, and then, because I think there's an application for us as individuals in this community. And that has to come from what you said about the black pill. It's easy to look up the hill at whether you're talking about the hill being DC, whether it's the hill being politics, whether it's the hill being the government, whether it's the hill being large corporations, the military-industrial complex, whatever you want to look up and say,
it's not going right up there, so therefore I don't have to do what's right down here. The other thing about gossip that I think that you've been bringing up that keeps, like, you keep hammering me with, maybe it's just because I'm listening to it, but is that it's not something that you can solve mechanically. You cannot solve it. It's something you can't exactly legislate away.
I think no, and you're right. You don't want that answer either.
No.
That's the other thing.
No,
you don't want that answer. Like, you don't want to forcefully you don't want to forcefully I don't know. That's not something that you want to forcefully imprint on people. That's something that you should be you should be striving to essentially make that a commonplace of your social morality. And I think there's been times where, like, everyone the other thing is America looks at only America's history, and that's fine. I like the whole Ron Swanson thing that he said on Parks and Rec. You know,
I don't know this quote. I've not seen Parks and Rec.
He's like, history started, again, butchering a quote, but who cares? It's not anything important. But he's like, history began on 1775 or 76. I think he actually says, like, the wrong one. I don't remember, because I can't remember where it was structured from, whether it was the 4th of July, like the actual foundation and independence, or if it was like when the whole process got started, right? But yeah, he's like, everything before that was a mistake. And it's like, that is funny, because America has risen to the top of the economic structure we've dominated in many ways, because, again, I do believe that at one point there was moral expectations of people, especially men, because they were the ones who did the punishment as well. The women were in charge of the actual upbringing within the home and the instilling of it out into the world, because, like, let's be real, when you're a little kid, it's a little bit, or at least as a guy, and I think girls probably get this even easier. As a guy, it's easier to get in trouble with your dad, because more than likely he's just gonna, like, spank you and send you to your room. But your mom is gonna do you're not gonna have you're not gonna get the extra cuddles. You're not gonna get the extra little little things that that mothers do to kind of encourage you to be a good person, and they coddle good behavior in you. And, like, as a little kid, you're like, I want that.
I mean, even as a son, it's like, it was easier to take, at times, I don't even know if that's right. At times it was easier to take advantage of my mother's grace.
Okay.
And as an adult, I regret that.
Yeah.
You know, as an adult, and even when I did it, when I have done it as an adult, where it's like, my mother is very gracious about something, and it's easy. But I think we're digressing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but going back to the original point, but it was instilled in other places, and it wasn't found through the lens of social media, which is where people are finding it now.
Yes.
And that's the unfortunate part, is we're longing for something that we may or may not have had. And I think for a lot of people, there's parts that they may have experienced the full effect, and there's parts that they may have not gotten any, and then there's people who, quite frankly, haven't gotten any of it, because that's the divorce rate in the country and all that stuff. So, but my point is, and I think if we want to stop going in little circles here, I think the point is, in my thought process, if you hang around gossip, if you partake in a lot of gossip, if you feed off gossip, and if you are building friendships off gossip, you probably want to reevaluate that, because more than likely the only person who will get burned by that in the end is you. And you will burn. Don't get me wrong, but you will burn a lot of other people. But at the end, the sole bearer of that weight, when it all comes crashing down, if it does, you can live a long lie, and some people live their whole life a lie. But I think when you start to look at it from I have one life on this earth. I have the hopeful promise of salvation, of eternal life, if I behave morally in this one. Do you want to go to the grave questioning, or do you want to make sure that you do as much as possible to avoid that?
Yeah, there's theological doctrines that will have questions on, like, we can't save ourselves with good works. But even in that sense, it's like, I think so much of modern, we'll use this as the segue, we'll close after this, but I think so much of modern society has reduced moral behavior into a potential future outcome instead of doing what's right because it's right.
Also true.
And get off. And yeah, this is a great thing. I'm sitting outside trying to,
but yeah, we can segue this part two. Inbound. We're going to talk about works. We're going to talk about the
salvation by grace.
Salvation by grace. We're going to talk about how there's a bunch of modernists that try to devolve every little beautiful thing in this world to just silly pieces of flesh.
The glorious collapse of the new atheist movement. That'll be part 2. All right, so where do people find you? How do they get a hold of you? Well, let's close this off. I'll change the lighting. We'll get ready for the next set.
Sounds good. So you can find me on Instagram primarily, Collin, COLLIN _ Underdahl, DAHL. I have linked to my YouTube, which hopefully someday will be a little bit more entertaining for y'all. I have a video planned about a very fun thing that I have, and hopefully I'm going to try and put some production value into it, so it's a little bit more fun. Generally, I like to just show range stuff, shooter by heart, and that's where I like to spend my fun time. So that has kind of turned into content for what I do, I guess. Yeah. But
I think we live at a good time. It's we don't get a choice in the matter, but it doesn't need to be all doom and gloom. So
nope.
Well, Collin, thanks for coming on for part 1. Let's refresh in a second, and we'll get started for part 2 on what's next. So, thank you very much for listening. This is the Redacted Culture Cast. I'm sitting here in a field with Collin Underdahl, which is one of the things that I like to get to do. I get to do that because you guys support us. If you want to continue supporting the show, you can head over to redactedculture.locals.com. I'm going to have to say that again because I don't know if I was even speaking in the microphone, but it's redactedculture.locals.com. That's the support link. I hear Patreon had a big hiccup, and that's not the first time they've had issues, so we're sticking with something else right now, and it's been good for us. So thank you very much for your support over there, and we will talk to you soon.